Alright, we are back with more FF7 news, including some exciting teases from Naoki Hamaguchi in regard to Cloud's Lifestream sequence that we'll be seeing in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. We also have some sales chart updates for Final Fantasy VII Remake on the Switch 2 and Xbox, and we'll be recapping the first part of the Ever Crisis Dirge of Cerberus, a Rising Crisis event. That was a mouthful, so let's talk about it. All right, so it's been about 5-6 days, 6-7, since Final Fantasy VII Remake launched on the Switch 2 and the Xbox. You'll have to forgive me, 6-7, it's really dumb, but my niece says it from time to time, and it just makes me laugh. It's super silly, I don't know why. It's stuck in my brain, but like, I can never think of 6 and 7 the same way ever again. It's just true brain rot. I'm impressed. But either way, 7 Remake on the Switch 2 and on the Xbox is proving that not only is there a huge demand for this game, but it's got some staying power as well. And we finally have some chart performance to back up all of that speculation in regards to 7 Remake's sales. Now, this chart information comes to us from Twitter user Actual Arrow, who was reporting that the physical edition of Final Fantasy VII Remake on Switch 2 was sold out online at stores Target, GameStop, and Best Buy, and it continues to be a #1 bestseller over on Amazon, and it's still the #1 best-selling game on the US Nintendo eShop, and I checked earlier today. It's still #1, with, funny enough, Dragon Quest VII Reimagined in the #2 spot. So clearly there are a lot of RPG fans in the Nintendo ecosystem who have been hungry for these types of games and are showing up in mass to support them, which is really awesome. And it really feels like Square Enix is building up a lot of goodwill and momentum with audiences in regards to the 7 Remake trilogy. And I hope that this is momentum that they can carry into the launch of Rebirth going multi-platform, which, if I had to guess, I would think that Rebirth would probably launch on Switch 2 and Xbox maybe sometime between July and December of this year. Again, if we jump back to that Nintendo interview with Naoki Hamaguchi, he did say that all of these games would release multi-platform in order, meaning Rebirth multi-platform will have to release before Part 3 comes out. So if they can kind of continue the momentum they built with 7 Remake and have, a few months from now, Rebirth gets announced for multi-platform and then it launches in the second half of the year, that's pretty big. And in terms of where they're at with Rebirth on the Switch 2, Hamaguchi said they're really just working on trying to nail the frame rate. So they seem to be pretty far in that port's development. And at any time between now and maybe June, they could announce officially, like, here's Rebirth for Switch 2. It's pretty cool. And I also hope that this signals to Square Enix that they should take some of their other games and put them on Switch 2. A game like Final Fantasy XVI, which has its problems, but when it hits super hard, I think would actually benefit from being on a Switch 2 in the sense that it's one of those games where you pull it out, you play it for a little bit, and then you put it away. Based on how that game structures out side quests and main missions and exploration, I actually think that a handheld would really benefit that game's gameplay structure. Because you could just pull it out, do some side quests, maybe do a story mission or here or there, and then put it away and then come back to it later. And I feel like it'd probably flow better. Again, I have some structural issues with that game. I think it's a smidge too long, more than a smidge. I think it just needed to be shorter and paced out better, and I think they could have restructured some things and cut out some story stuff, and it'd be a much better game for me. But again, when that game hits, it hits super hard. Now, of course, we can't forget about the Xbox. Over on the Xbox, 7 Remake debuted in the #9 spot on the list of top paid games. Now you're thinking, number 9, that's not number 1. That's a failure. Not entirely. The thing you have to keep in mind here is that 7 Remake launched on the Xbox digital only. There is no physical version, so for these to be all digital downloads and it's in the 9th spot, I think that's pretty impressive, especially since most of the marketing was geared towards the Switch 2. So 7 Remake's got staying power. people are looking forward to playing it, and I hope that they can take that momentum into Rebirth and then inevitably into Part 3. Now, speaking of Part 3 and some anticipation that all of us have for one specific sequence in that game, I'm talking the Lifestream sequence where Cloud puts his mind back together. We actually got a little tease from Naoki Hamaguchi himself via content creator Vinesauce, not to be confused with Vsauce. I believe these are two completely different entities. However, Vinesauce and some other journalists and creators, including Jason Schreier, actually had lunch with Naoki Hamaguchi the day after he was in New York to celebrate the launch of Remake on the Switch 2 at the Nintendo store in New York City. That's a mouthful. But anyway, as they were having, this lunch/breakfast, Vinesauce asked Hamaguchi, hey, what part from the OG FF7 are you most looking forward to in the Remake series? To which Hamaguchi responded, in our write-up, comes to us from the Shinra Archaeology Department over on Blue Sky. Thanks to them for transcribing this little piece from Vinesauce's podcast over on YouTube. The SAD goes on to write, FF7 Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi says the part of the OG he's looking forward to in Part 3 is Cloud finding himself with the help of Tifa. He said that was the part he was looking forward to, and that they nailed it. Man, I'm so excited. Again, Hamaguchi just seems like he's chomping at the bit, man. He is ready to talk about Part 3 and just show off to everyone what they've been working on. He seems so confident and proud. And again, that's very rare for Japanese developers. And a lot of the hype Hamaguchi built up around Rebirth, he wasn't lying. I was not let down by that game. I wasn't let down by Remake. And a lot of the stuff that he says does end up being true. So for him to be like, yeah, that Lifestream sequence, that's the one I was looking forward to the most. We did it and we nailed it. That gives me a lot of reassurance, but also a lot of excitement, specifically for Part 3 and looking towards that scene in particular, because it's such a vital moment within that story. And there are so many big moments in that game from a story standpoint that stick out, but that Lifestream sequence where Tifa helps Cloud put his mind back together and he becomes his true self is such an incredibly cathartic and beautiful moment. And I think the reason why it resonates so much is because we can all relate to Cloud in that moment. Regardless of your age, your race, your gender, what part of life you're in, I think we all have those moments where we're trying to figure out who the heck we actually are. And we think we know. We put up this facade of what we think we should be or who the people around us want us to be or what we think society wants us to be. And then that crumbles and we're trying to desperately search for our identity. And for a character like Cloud, who is flawed, who is cool, who's goofy, who's a little dorky at times, for him to finally break through and realize who he is and that he doesn't have to be embarrassed or ashamed of that person, it's such an incredibly beautiful narrative moment that we're all just looking forward to. It's also the big twist in that story for, spoiler alert, for people who haven't played the original, and there are new people jumping on board with 7 Remake. So if you're one of those people, massive spoiler alert here. That's the big twist in the story when we find out Cloud isn't who we thought he was. He has these jumbled up memories of Zack and what happened in Nibelheim, and he creates this persona via trauma and PTSD and Mako poisoning of who he thinks he truly is. And to have that moment as a player and be like, whoa, this actually happened in Nibelheim. Cloud's not super crazy. Tifa's also not super crazy. It's such an incredibly big moment within that game's story that everyone really remembers. And we're all looking forward to seeing that in Part 3 with the remake. And what's gonna make it even better are the voice performances by Cody Christian, who is the voice of Cloud, and Britt Baron, my wife, who is the voice of Tifa Lockhart. Everyone in this cast is so good, but these two in particular are so phenomenal as Cloud and Tifa. And if we look back to Rebirth, if that very intimate scene between the two of them in Gongaga after the reactor incident is any indicator of what we're going to see in Part 3 with the Lifestream sequence, they are going to nail it. That scene in Gungaga where the two of them are just so vulnerable and open with one another is arguably one of the best moments within that game. It is so well written, so well performed, so well paced, and it just shows how much the developers understand those characters, how much the directors understand those characters, how much the actors understand those characters. So I have full faith that they're gonna demolish it in part 3 and deliver an incredible performance that is just really gonna hit people in the heart. I cannot wait, man. It's gonna be so good. And there's so many things to look forward to in part 3 that stick out, because the last bit of story that part 3 has left to tell from the OG is like some of the craziest, bonkiest stuff that we are anticipating. There's Vincent's backstory, there's Cid's backstory, there's the Yuffie going back to Wutai, now introducing this Wutai War. There's getting the High Wind, there's the appearance of the weapons and battling them. There's so many gameplay and story things that we are just waiting for, and I truly feel like part 3, if done right, could be the best of the trilogy. I think they'll take all the best parts and the vibes of 7 Remake, because the vibes in 7 Remake, in my opinion, they're unmatched. I love Rebirth. I think it's the better game, but there's something about the vibe of Remake that just hits different that I love. I think they'll take the best elements of Rebirth, but also the new foundation, the originality, the strong points of what they've learned and refined over the years for part 3. They're going to take all that stuff together, and we're going to get this incredibly delicious Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 meal. That's like a surf and turf, you know? You got some steak, you got some salmon, maybe you've got some really tasty mashed potatoes or macaroni and cheese, some seasoned green beans. I'm honestly just making myself really hungry right now. But if done right, and I think it is done right because Hamaguchi and the team haven't let me down yet, I think it's going to be, again, the best of the trilogy, but potentially one of the best games that Square Enix has probably put out in a minute. And maybe that's not saying much because Rebirth reviewed very well. It's the second best reviewed Final Fantasy, right behind 9. So, you know, maybe part 3 could get into that number 1 spot. I don't know. But the confidence from Hamaguchi, and not even just him, but people like Kitase. I remember there was an interview we covered here on the channel. If I can find it again, I'll leave a link in the description as well as the upper right hand corner of this video. But Kitase and Hamaguchi were interviewed by Edge magazine. And I remember at the end of that interview, Kitase was asked about how he felt about this remake trilogy. And he talked about doing part 3 and getting to the end. And his words were to the effect of, "It's good to know that we didn't mess it up." So I have full faith that this game will be incredible, that they will stick the landing, because that confidence is so rare in game developers in Japan. And again, based on what I played on Remake and Rebirth, I think they're gonna kill it, man. And I cannot wait. I think it's gonna potentially be something truly, truly special. And now, we move over to our Dirge of Cerberus, a Rising Crisis event from Ever Crisis. It turns out they're doing an actual campaign for this game. It's not like Advent Children where it's just a collection of cutscenes and no chibi characters. We got the chibi characters. We've got a lot of in-game stuff, dialogue from the original game. It's a pretty interesting event, but let's start our recap, shall we? So, our story opens up with a flashback of the events of Meteor Fall from Final Fantasy VII. Yuffie and Vincent have stayed behind to help the citizens of Midgar evacuate. However, Vincent asks Yuffie to check her scanners for more signs of life at the Mako Cannon, where they fought Hojo, to which there appears to still be someone alive up there. Vincent tells Yuffie to rendezvous with Cloud and the others while he races to the cannon. When Vincent reaches the top, he sees Hojo's body slumped over the control console. But before Vincent can put a bullet in him, lightning strikes the platform, allowing Hojo to escape. Yuffie does show up in time to save Vincent, but Hojo managed to activate a program on that control console. We flash forward 3 years later to Vincent spending time with Lucrezia in her cave, hearing her apologies echo in his head. However, Vincent still feels guilt over how things happened, and he feels he should be the one to apologize. After that moment, we cut back to Vincent in Calm as a revival festival is taking place. As Vincent is reminiscing, we overhear on his TV a report of a sealed door finally being broken after 3 years. The door's location? Under the Shinra building. The building is rumored to have been the place where human experiments may have been carried out. Outside of Vincent's room, we see the citizens of Calm celebrating merrily until they're attacked by a militarized force of helicopters, soldiers, and monsters, who we know to be Deep Ground. Vincent springs into action, eliminating a chopper, but unfortunately he's too late to help everyone, as Deep Ground has begun kidnapping the citizens of Calm. We then see two of these Deep Ground soldiers watching Vincent in a room, with the tall one asking the little one, "Is this the one?" To which she confirms. Back in Calm, Vincent is looking for answers and decides to meet up with Reeve. However, he's attacked by those two soldiers who we saw in that control room, who happen to be looking for something called the proto-materia. The big guy orders 3 soldiers to attack Vincent. They attack Vincent while yelling "Glory to Vice." Vincent takes them out and the big guy steps up next, but his partner passes out, leading them to retreat. As he leaves, he tells Vincent his name is Azul and that they'll meet again. Reeve finally finds Vincent and asks what happened. Vincent tells Reeve that the large one called himself Azul. Reeve is familiar with the name and proceeds to call him Azul the Cerulean, a member of the Sviets. Reeve knows this is bad news and asks Vincent to join him in the WRO to help with rescue efforts, with the WRO being the World Regenesis Organization, a group led by Reeve whose goal is to help those affected by the meteor fall crisis from 3 years ago and fight against any remaining threats to the planet. To Reeve's surprise, Vincent refuses to join. However, before things can be explained further, Reeve is gunned down by a stray Deep Ground soldier. Vincent handles the soldier and runs to Reeve's aid when it's revealed that Reeve was actually Kate Sith in a Reeve suit. Seeing that Vincent still cared for Reeve, Kate manages to get Vincent on board to help him run the remaining Deep Ground soldiers out of Calm. Now, Vincent and the WRO managed to clear out the remaining Deep Ground soldiers, but unfortunately, Reeve has gotten word that the city of Edge is being targeted next. The duo then heads off to help the city. On the ride there, Vincent asks for answers. Reeve begins to explain to him that these are Deep Ground soldiers they're dealing with, Deep Ground being a group formed by President Shinra, acting as a shadow of the company and hidden from the rest of the world. These soldiers were created to be a new superhuman set of warriors, but without morality. Within the group is an elite squad of soldiers called the Sviets, to which Azul is a member of. Little information is known about Deep Ground since their existence was on a need-to-know basis by the president, with only Scarlet, Heidegger, and Hojo knowing of the group's existence. Reeve then asks Vincent if he's heard about this mass disappearance that's been happening in Junon. Vincent replies he has, and that people were being told that around 20 to 30 people had gone missing, but Reeve informs him that the real number is actually 1,200. After the disappearance of those people, rumors of screaming coming from Midgar began to surface. The duo is then interrupted by a rogue transmission being broadcast to everyone. Here we see the fuzzy image of who we know to be Vice, delivering a morbid monologue of his plan to cleanse the world of impure people in brutal fashion. Slashed, strangled, and slaughtered. The transmission ends and Reeve asks Vincent to head to Edge alone while he looks into this disturbing transmission. Reluctantly, Vincent heads to Edge. While in the city, he runs into a red-headed woman who works for the WRO. She introduces herself as Shalua Rui, to which my phone kept autocorrecting to Shakira. It blew my mind. Apple, fix your keyboard, it's horrendous. But anyway, the pair notice that there are no traces of Deep Ground soldiers or the WRO squads who are sent to fight them. The streets are completely deserted. Realizing they're getting nowhere, she decides to leave and resume her previous search. Vincent asks her what she's looking for, and she replies, "My reason to live." As Vincent continues his search, he comes across another Sviet, known as Rosso, the Crimson. She is also looking for this proto-materia, which is a materia said to be the key to controlling the weapon known as Omega. A fight then breaks out between the two, with Vincent losing control and transforming into his chaos form. He manages to send Rosso running, but passes out from overexertion. During his sleep, Vincent recalls the moment he was murdered by Hojo, who then proceeds to make plans to experiment on Vincent's body. When Vincent awakens, he's being held in a stasis tube back in the WRO facility, with Shalua having rescued him after his fight in Edge. She asks him if that wild transformation happens often, to which Vincent responds with, "You mean chaos?" Shallua is stunned to hear Vincent harbors the Chaos Gene. She recognizes the name from Lucrezia's previous works and wonders if she had experimented on him. Vincent was unaware of all of this. Shallua begins to explain Lucrezia's work to him, telling him about a potential sentient xenoform that resides inside humans. However, her research was deemed so far out there that nobody within Shinra took her seriously. As the conversation continues, Vincent begins to hear a voice in his head saying, "I'm so sorry. Awaken." However, they're then interrupted by Reeve, to which Vincent rehashes the previous conversation to catch him up. But suddenly, out of nowhere, Shallua recites a verse about chaos and Omega, saying, "Soul wrought of terra corrupt, quelling impurity, purging the stream to beckon forth in ultimate fate. Behold, mighty chaos, Omega's squire to the lofty heavens." I felt like Genesis reading that. Oh boy. Reeve asks her how she knows this work, and Shallua responds that she read a small bit of Lucrezia's notes. She feels, though, that they need to collect more info on Lucrezia and her work to make any sense of this situation. At this moment, the WRO base is attacked by deep ground soldiers led by Azul. After the attack, Vincent and Shania, my keyboard just autocorrected Shallua to Shania Twain. Okay, you guys get the point. They're both confronted by the young girl that we saw with Azul. Her name is Shulk. Here we learn that Shania, again, it says Shania, oh, Jesus Christ, and Shulk are sisters who were separated at a young age. Shallua wants to reconnect, but Shulk wants nothing to do with her, having felt completely abandoned by her sister. In the 10 years since their separation, Shulk was experimented on and tortured. She is now at a point in life where she needs daily Mako infusions just to stay alive. In this moment, Reeve shows up and pleads with Shulk to forgive her sister, explaining to her how much she's lost in the search for her sister, her arm, her eye, even internal organs. But none of this gets through to Shulk, and she attempts to attack her sister. But Vincent manages to shoot her with a tranquilizer dart, saving Shallua. Vincent then heads off to look for Azul. The two happen to find one another, and Azul asks Vincent if he even knows why he exists. Vincent is unable to answer, and Azul begins his attack. Vincent does some sweet parkour, evading Azul and disappearing in the process, only to reappear with a huge RPG-looking weapon that Azul seems to recognize, blasting and incapacitating him. It's at this point that Vincent realizes he needs to find some answers about who he is and what his purpose is, and he informs Reeve that he's heading back to Nibelheim. And with that, we end part 1 of this Dirge of Cerberus, a Rising Crisis event. Now, according to the game, this Dirge event is going to be split up into 3 separate parts. Now, based on how Ever Crisis structures out these events, I would assume Part 2 is next week, and then Part 3 is probably the week after. Although, they may drop Part 2 and 3 next week as well. I have no idea. I plan to do the chapters separately unless they drop together, so you can check the channel for further updates. But I'll be honest with you guys, that was kind of a chore to get through. It's just kind of reminding me why I didn't really click with Dirge of Cerberus. Again, there are some really cool aspects, specifically Vincent's backstory with the proto-materia and how he's, got this chaos form, this chouse form that he can transform into. But from what I remember, Hojo is Hojo. He's awful. But I also remember Lucrezia being pretty terrible too. Essentially allowing Shinra and Hojo to experiment on her unborn baby, which is super messed up. But I also feel like there's a bit of a disconnect there with some of the newer characters like Shallua, who I kept wanting to say Shallula, like the hot sauce Cholula, and Shulk. It's really, really hard to kind of have an attachment to these newer characters who, there's some interesting things there, but it just doesn't feel well executed. It feels kind of shallow at times, unfortunately. And I think what also made it kind of difficult to get through was that in this first part in Ever Crisis, there was 0 combat encounters. And I kept waiting for them. I purposely spent time leveling up my Vincent because I'm like, all right, we got Dirge. There's going to be some combat stuff. I got to be ready. Vincent's now level 56. I'm ready to go. And even within the story, there was many moments where you thought a battle was going to happen. Deep ground soldiers show up. Cool. We're going to fight them. Oh, I found Azul. Let's fight him. But no, there was no combat. And as each section would end, I'm like, okay, is the next one that pops up going to be combat? Nope, it's full on story. Next one, no combat. Next one, story. So I think maybe having some combat there would have helped break up the flow of what I was experiencing and engaging with. But man, it was kind of a trudge to get through this recap in terms of like playing it and then writing out my notes. And I just, oh man. Dirge, you weird game. It was such a weird time to be a Final Fantasy VII fan. And even though I'm not super ecstatic about Dirge, I do plan to cover the rest of it. I feel kind of obligated to, if I'm being honest. But maybe things will pick up a little bit because, again, with this being more of an abridged version of Dirge, they can maybe cut out some more of the weird stuff, and maybe things will improve a little bit from here. But even though there weren't any combat encounters within the main campaign, which is odd, you can still fight Azul. He is a separate solo battle that you can fight to get level ups, to get rewards, to fight harder versions. So at least that is there. It just seems odd that they didn't have any combat encounters. And as far as like cutscenes go, they used the original cutscenes from Dirge, the CG stuff, as well as the in-game stuff, and that's mixed in there with all of the newer updated chibi scenarios. So it's a mixed bag, but I don't know if it's just exhaustion. I feel really weird right now. But I'll keep up with it. I'll see how they release the future parts. Again, there's going to be 3 parts total. But with that being said, that's the video. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of what we covered in today's video, whether it's the sales performance for 7 Remake on Switch 2 and Xbox, or the anticipation for the Lifestream sequence in Remake Part 3. And what are you guys feeling so far about Dirge of Cerberus, A Rising Crisis, and Ever Crisis? Are you excited? Are you feeling it? Are you indifferent? Are you kind of exhausted like I am? Let me know in those comments down below. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.